On the 18th of September 1945, a German SS general, who was considered one of Heinrich Himmler's most trusted officials, was led into a courtyard in the Czech city of Prague for his execution. He was brought to his execution pole, where the executioner was stood waiting for him. Within minutes, the execution of Walter Schmidt had been performed. At the end of the Second World War, there were many former Nazis and members of governments who had collaborated with the Germans inside of Czechoslovakia, who were brought for their executions inside different Czech cities. A number of high-ranking politicians and prime ministers even met their fates at the execution posts, but Walter Schmidt was 66 years old when he was condemned for his actions during the Second World War. But he is often a forgotten member of the Nazi war effort, and he was a man who became a personnel officer in the office of the head of the SS, Himmler, and he was a man who rose to the position of the chief of the SS Personnel Main Office, and he was also a general of the Waffen-SS, the military branch of the paramilitary group. Join us today as we look at the ruthless execution of Himmler's SS general, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Walter Schmidt was born on the 13th of January 1879 inside of Hamburg, and he had a rather normal upbringing. As a young man, he joined the Imperial German Army in January 1899, and he began his military career as a cadet inside of Infantry Regiment 77, based in Celle. He studied at military school for some time, and following the completion of his courses, he was commissioned into the German Army with the rank of a lieutenant or lieutenant. He then trained to become a weapons officer based in a rifle factory, before he worked as an adjutant inside another battalion. Further promotions came, and this was all before the First World War broke out, but following the outbreak of the conflict, he was then said to have been a company commander in the 2nd Reserve Infantry Regiment, but it would not be long before he saw conflict on the battlefield. But in September 1914, Schmidt was captured on the battlefield, and he was then sent to a French prisoner of war camp, and was kept there for almost 4 years. But he was then released in July 1918 to Switzerland, and he was then discharged to Germany at the end of the war. However, Schmidt did manage to remain inside of the German military following the defeat of the First World War. He was a member of the Reichswehr, which was a restricted 100,000 force that the army was permitted to have at the end of the war, and he was discharged from service on the 31st of December 1920. But in the year following his army career coming to an end, Schmidt was then seeking work inside of a normal career, and he was then the head of personnel at a weaving mill in Hamburg. In this job he was responsible for workers, and he would listen to complaints that they had about the work and conditions, but he continued to rise throughout labour circles, and even became a labour judge in a court in Hamburg, and he then joined the German National People's Party. But it would not be long before he would, on the 1st of April 1931, join the Nazi Party, and he was within the first 600,000 members. But following working at the mill and becoming more entrenched with the Nazi Party, he then left his job and he joined the SA, Hitler's stormtroopers and brown shirts. These were Hitler's personal bodyguards, and they were involved in disrupting the political meetings of political enemies, and they also carried out a lot of violence on the streets. Schmidt also a year later joined the SS, Hitler's paramilitary group, who would later become the guards and executioners of the concentration camps. Schmidt then rose through the SS, and he was a skilled administrator, and in March 1934 he was recruited to go and work as a personnel officer inside the office of the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. In this he was having a number of conversations with high-ranking members of the SS on a daily basis, and he also became the head of the SS personnel department, as well as a personal advisor and adjutant to Heinrich Himmler. He advised Himmler, the head of the SS, for a number of different issues, and he also became good friends with him, and on the 30th of January 1937 he then became an inspector inside of the SS schools. He would visit different sites and ensure that the education was what was in line and what was expected from Himmler, and these schools were ruthless, raising future SS leaders. However, this was all occurring to Walter Schmidt before the Second World War broke out, and he was also placed in control of the main security staff before the annexation of Austria inside the Third Reich, and he was in control of many SS members. But as recruitment in the group ramped up and many more members joined, Walter Schmidt was then made the chief of the personnel main office. This was responsible for the administration of personal affairs regarding all leaders and officers of the SS, and this included the SD members and Waffen-SS members. He was in control of all SS honour rings and giving them out, as well as dishing out SS honour swords. But the most senior position that Walter Schmidt obtained within the group was becoming a general of the SS. However, within a number of months of this, in June 1942, he was taken very ill, and because of this he then left the management of his office to Maximilian von Herth, who succeeded him. Schmidt, following his recovery, then became an officer who was given special assignments from Heinrich Himmler, and he replaced Theodor Eicke as a member of the Reichstag, following his death in the Third Battle of Kharkov. But at the end of the Second World War, Walter Schmidt found himself arrested, then handed over to the Czech people. At the end of the Second World War, as the war had turned against the Germans, there were many members of the SS, including many senior figures, who tried to hide out and conceal their actions during the war. Many members of the concentration camp guard staff found themselves hunted, and a number of SS men and women managed to escape any form of punishment, and some are actually still being brought in front of the courts today for their crimes. However, a number, including even Heinrich Himmler, found himself inside the hands of the Allies, as did Walter Schmidt. Schmidt was then taken to the Czech People's Court, as he was said to have been someone who contributed to the slaughter and deaths of hundreds of prisoners inside of Nazi concentration camps within Germany, Poland and Bohemia. Many Czech people suffered heavily during the Second World War, and there were huge deportations in which people were sent to their deaths inside camps such as Treblinka and Sobibor. But specifically inside of the courtroom, Walter Schmidt was considered a close friend and aide to Heinrich Himmler, and he was someone who was said to have provided Himmler with counsel on a number of devastating ideas, and it was proven that he knew about the horrors of the concentration camps. It was said he was also Himmler's personal adjutant, who was sent to inspect a number of the concentration camps, where he saw firsthand what was happening. This included Auschwitz, the deadliest site, Mauthausen, Ravensbrück, Sachsenhausen, and many others that Schmidt visited. Because of this and his actions, he was then sentenced to death by the Czech court. Inside of the land, many Nazi war criminals were condemned using pole hanging methods. This was a different method of hanging, which was used throughout the country. There were a number of high-ranking politicians and members of the SS and Nazi Party executed by this. On the 18th of September 1945, Schmidt was at the age of 66, brought to the execution pole in Prague, and he was led out by a number of guards and a couple of officials. They were there to make sure that he did not abscond and run off, and he was then taken to his executioner and was handed over to him on the execution post. Pole hanging had a number of steps. Firstly, Walter Schmidt was made to stand before his 3-metre high pole, and a rope was then attached around his feet and then secured through a pulley at the bottom of the pole, and he was then hoisted to the top of the pole by using a sling across his chest and under his arms. Schmidt then had the noose secured around his neck, which was also secured to a hook at the top of the pole. Everything was checked by the executioner, and the order was then given to release the chest sling, and Schmidt then jerked downwards, and the executioner placed the heel of his hand beneath Schmidt's jaw to increase the force on his neck, and this dislocated it and brought his death. He was one of around 1,000 people executed during this time using this specific method. Walter Schmidt was a man who was a ruthless inspector, and he was also the chief of the SS personnel main office. He was condemned at the end of the war as a war criminal, and he also served as a member of the Reichstag and German Parliament. He was someone who had intricate knowledge of the planning and slaughter of what happened inside the concentration camps, and he ensured that these were being as efficient as possible in the horrific actions of murder. But at the age of 66 he was taken to his execution inside of Czechoslovakia, and he was executed as a brutal and barbaric war criminal of the Second World War. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.